All right. Well, welcome to my presentation on Rhode Island Clean Energy Incentive Programs. As Jeff said, my name is Amanda Barker, and I am the Clean Energy Program Coordinator at Green Energy Consumers Alliance. In case you're not familiar with Green Energy Consumers, we are a nonprofit based in both Providence and Boston, Massachusetts. And our mission is to empower consumers and communities to speed a just transition to a zero carbon world. And we do this through both programs and advocacy. So we have a lot of consumer facing programs helping educate consumers about heat pumps, electric vehicles, solar, basically any way that you can decarbonize your home. And then we also do a lot of climate advocacy. So we have a policy advocate in both states. I was previously a Rhode Island policy advocate, and now Tina Munter is our policy advocate here. And we advocate for policies like the Building Decarb Act and other policies to meet the Act on Climate. Our priorities often align with Carrie's. So agenda for today. First, I'm just going to do some level setting. I'm sure most of you are familiar with Rhode Island's climate policies that we've passed so far. So I'll just quickly go over that. And then I'll dive into the various different incentive programs. So we'll talk about heat pumps, energy efficiency, solar incentives, electric vehicle and e-bike incentives. And then I will, of course, address the elephant in the room, which is the federal uncertainty and what's going on with a lot of the federal tax credits. And then we'll leave time for questions. So now to just kind of level set about what Rhode Island is currently doing to address climate change. Rhode Island has the Act on Climate, which mandates emissions reductions. These are legally binding. If the state does not meet these emissions reductions targets, they can be sued by anyone, including individuals, but most likely will be sued by the Conservation Law Foundation and a bunch of climate groups. The next target is 45% below 1990 levels by 2030. We met the 2020 target, and then ultimately need to meet net zero emissions by 2050. The state did come up with a plan on how to meet the 2030 target in 2022. Unfortunately, that plan fell short. Modeling of that plan showed that if the state enacts everything they said they would do in that plan, they would only achieve 40% emissions reductions by 2030. And again, the legally binding mandate is 45%. So this is just a graph showing where the state is at in terms of achieving the Act on Climate. So as you can see, we did achieve the 2020 mandate of 10% emissions reductions, but this was a low target given that the ultimate goal is net zero by 2050. The state still has a very long way to go. You will see that emissions decrease between 2020 and 2021. Any guesses as to why that is?
COVID.
Yep, we basically shut down all transportation. And so emissions dipped. And then when everything opened back up, emissions increased again. That also was a warmer winter. So there was also less heating demand in 2020. So we met the 2020 mandate, but emissions are going back up. They are decreasing now in 2022 slightly, but we need to meet that 2030 mandate of 45% emissions reductions. And this big red dot shows where the current climate plan is supposed to get us, which is not on track. And again, that's if they implement everything in the plan, which they are not doing. Which is why groups like us and Carrie exist, to keep pushing them along. So here is the state's latest greenhouse gas emissions inventory. Transportation is our largest source of greenhouse gas emissions, making up 36.6%. However, emissions from heating are a very close second. If you add up residential heating, commercial heating, and industrial heating, that adds up to 35.2%. If you also count natural gas distribution, which I think should be counted, it basically is more than transportation emissions. The electricity sector makes up 18.6% of the state's emissions. So the state is required to create an updated climate plan called the 2025 Climate Strategy, which they are actively working on right now and must finalize by the end of the year. this is really going to be the make it or break it plan that will tell us whether the state is going to get back on track to meeting the Act on Climate. So we've been advocating for this plan to be very detailed, to have clear modeling on how exactly a policy is going to result in emissions reductions and what those emissions reductions are. We're also calling for clear subsector targets, so we know how much we need to reduce emissions from buildings versus transportation versus electricity. How many heat pumps do we need? How many EVs do we need? Let's get really specific, because right now the sectors are all kind of pointing fingers at each other and like, oh no, we can reduce emissions from electricity and do less in buildings and vice versa. So we really need those clear subsector targets to avoid that. So now getting into some of the clean energy incentive programs that are available in Rhode Island. First, we're going to start off with energy efficiency and heat pumps. So a first step to both saving money and reducing your heating emissions is a free home energy assessment from Rhode Island Energy. Energy efficiency should always be first before you look at installing a heat pump. So basically, this is a free program that will send an energy specialist out to your house free of charge. And that specialist will assess your current energy usage and just take a look at your home and help you develop a plan to make your home more energy efficient, as well as educate you on rebates and incentives that are available to you. There are a couple of eligibility requirements. You do need to be a customer of Rhode Island Energy. Most people are, since that's our main utility in the state. You do need to live in a 1 to 4 unit home, so no large apartment complexes. And you need to have full access to the house and the ability to install any of the recommended measures. So if you do rent, you can get an energy assessment. You just need to get approval from your landlord if they do want to install any measures in your home. So the first step is to schedule. There's the link to schedule. You can now schedule online, so you don't need to call them. You still can call them if you want. We'll circulate these slides afterwards, so you can easily click on that link if you're interested. The energy specialist comes out to your home. They give you no-cost energy efficiency products. So they can give you weather stripping to help seal off any leaks indoors or things like that. They also give you low flow faucets that help, save water. They'll give you special outlets that don't draw on electricity when your products aren't using electricity. And then the big thing is you can receive 75 to 100% off approved installation, up to $10,000. Now I heard from the utility that most installation costs less than $10,000, so this should be free, which is a big driver for why renters should do this, because there shouldn't be a cost to the landlord. I personally have been advocating for my landlord to do this because there shouldn't be a cost, because usually installation is less than $10,000. They also offer no cost air sealing, and then they just inform you about other rebates like the heat pump rebates that you may be eligible for. Who here is familiar with what a heat pump is? Okay, most of the room. Cool, so you all know that it's the same technology as an air conditioner and refrigerator. Basically, it's just like those technologies, but in reverse. So it can take heat out of your house, or it can put heat into your house, and it can toggle back and forth between heating and cooling, which is going to be a big benefit if you don't have air conditioning. Installing a heat pump will give you both heating and cooling, which is going to become increasingly important as we experience more heat waves with climate change. Refrigerant is the key operator in all of these systems. It's basically just a highly temperature sensitive fluid or gas, depending on which state it's in, and it can absorb heat out of temperatures as low as -17 degrees, and it can also generate cool air in temperatures as high as 120 degrees. And this picture on the right is water pumps. I like to refer to heat pumps as water pumps. They basically, water pumps doesn't create the water, they just move the water from one place to another. Heat pumps are doing the same thing. They're just taking the heat from one place and moving it to another. They're not creating heat like fossil fuel sources do. So that's why they're very efficient, because they're just moving heat rather than generating it. Now, you may have heard that heat pumps are not efficient down to very cold temperatures. While this was true in the past, it is no longer true in the present. Heat pump technology has significantly improved over recent years, and we now have cold climate heat pumps that can efficiently produce heat down to -17 degrees Fahrenheit. So if you are getting a heat pump in New England, you do want to make sure it is cold climate rated so that it can work in those freezing temperatures. Heat pumps come in various different forms. There are ducted heat pumps, which distribute heat through existing ductwork in the home, or there's ductless. This picture here on the bottom is of a ductless heat pump where you have a mini split head, and then the top is the outside unit called the condenser. And basically there's a thin wire that runs from the outside unit to the inside head if you don't have ducts. You can also get whole home or partial home heat pumps, so you can choose to only convert part of your home to heat pumps or convert your entire house. And then there's two different types of heat pumps. There's air source heat pumps, which take heat out of the air, and then there's ground source heat pumps, which take heat from the ground. Ground source heat pumps are slightly more efficient than air source heat pumps, but they're also more expensive. Now to get into the incentives. So currently there is a federal tax credit for heat pumps. That may change with the new administration, and we will get into that in a later slide. But as of right now, there is a 30% credit on heat pumps and heat pump water heaters up to $2,000. There is also a $600 credit for electrical upgrades. So the total credit per year is up to $3,200 for multiple energy efficiency measures. However, you cannot claim both a heat pump credit and a heat pump water heater credit in the same year, as that goes over that $3,200 cap. There's also no rollover of credits across years, but you can claim new equipment credit each year for 10 years. So for example, you could do a heat pump credit 1 year, and then the next year do a heat pump hot water heater credit, as long as the credit is still available. And there is a qualified equipment list, which I've linked here, as well as just more information from the IRS on how to access the credit. Now in Rhode Island, there was and sort of still is state level incentives. They do vary by fuel source and income. So there is well, first of all, who here heats with gas? Okay. Who heats with oil or propane? Okay. Anyone heat with electric resistance heat? Okay, that's good, because that's very expensive and inefficient. Anyone have a heat pump? Yay, cool. Okay, so you guys can speak to how awesome they are. So unfortunately, right now, the only incentive that's available is for electric resistance heat, and that's the incentive through Rhode Island Energy. There was another program and will be another program in the future called Clean Heat Rhode Island, which is the state's incentive program that offers incentives for heat pumps for oil, propane, and gas customers. That program is currently paused because it ran out of funding. It was being funded by COVID stimulus dollars that ran out, and the state did not line up an additional funding source for it. So unfortunately, they had to pause it. The good news is they are actively looking for new funding, and I know for certain that they are planning to relaunch the low-income pathway this July, so next month. The market rate, so moderate income and above, is hopefully going to relaunch in the second half of this year. They're planning to allocate RGGI funding, Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative funding, to this program, but that has not officially been announced yet. So hopefully that will come to fruition. I do want to note that the low income incentive that's going to relaunch in July is only for oil and propane customers, and then Rhode Island Energy has an incentive for electric resistance customers. And that is to ensure that we are not increasing low-income households' energy burdens, because right now the cost of operating a heat pump compared to a gas system can still be slightly more expensive. And so we don't want to be increasing their utility bills by having them transition to a heat pump. If you are on oil or propane, heat pumps are typically less expensive to operate. So if you're on oil, propane, or electric resistance heating, we do recommend making the switch because it will result in utility bill savings for you. The gas system, unfortunately, is still very cheap to operate, and so heat pumps can be a little bit more expensive than that. There are some mechanisms that can be used to help solve that problem. For example, Massachusetts is enacting a heat pump rate, where this winter, all 3 investor-owned utilities in Massachusetts will basically offer a discount to anyone who has a heat pump on their electricity, so that it is less expensive for them to operate that heat pump compared to all fuel sources. Right now, it is less expensive for oil, propane, electric resistance, but that heat pump rate ensures that it's less expensive for gas too. So that is something that we want to advocate for next year in Rhode Island. There also is a home electrification and appliance rebate program in Rhode Island. This program came out of the Inflation Reduction Act, and you probably heard about it in the news. It launched in September of 2024, and then the Trump administration came in and paused all of these programs illegally, and Rhode Island has very quietly relaunched this program. So it is open again, only the low-income pathway. And they very quietly relaunched it to not draw attention to the state and, hope that Trump doesn't notice that we've reopened it. And
is that because one of our lawsuits succeeded at getting the federal funds unlocked?
Yes, this was one of the Attorney General's lawsuits.
Don't talk about it.
It'll be our secret.
Yeah. So because it is only the low-income pathway, they're going directly through the CAP agencies to reach people who are on fuel assistance. So they're still getting a lot of people enrolled in this program quietly behind the scenes, which is cool. And these are incentives for efficient appliances and electrical wiring upgrades. So there's incentives for heat pump clothes dryers, electric stoves, induction cooktops, things like that. The moderate income pathway is supposed to launch this year, but that is up in the air given that they didn't get their final approval during the Biden administration, and it's kind of crickets from the Trump administration now. This just goes over who is eligible for the HERE rebate. The income thresholds are determined by area median income, and so this table shows that. So if you are interested in installing a heat pump, Clean Heat Rhode Island is still offering no-cost virtual consultations, where they'll walk through specifics about your home and what type of heat pump might be right for you, what sort of system. They also do quote comparisons, where they'll review up to 3 quotes and kind of explain why one might be more expensive, but maybe it's because it uses higher efficiency equipment, so you'll end up saving in the operating costs, things like that. So we really recommend going through this process with them. They're really helpful and knowledgeable advisors. And as I said, this is still open despite the rebates being paused. And again, the federal rebate is still available. So you can still pursue that, hopefully until the end of the year, if not longer, but definitely until the end of the year.
Do you know, we have a question on Zoom.
Oh,
do you know how the income is calculated? Like for a retired person, would it include anything about their assets or just the Social Security income or whatever?
That is a great question. I don't know the answer to that, but I will find that out. That'd be good to know. All right.
Probably just AGI from your tax form.
Probably. Yeah.
Question there.
Question? Yeah.
Would the incentive still apply to like a hybrid heat pump system?
That's a good question. In Rhode Island, I don't believe so. In Massachusetts, they do have varying levels of incentives based on if it's hybrid or not, basically how much emissions reductions it's going to result in. But I think Rhode Island is just, you know, a full heat pump or nothing.
Pretty niche, so.
Yeah. Okay, so now to move on to your solar options.
Can I?
Yeah.
What about incentives for landlords to put heat pumps in rental units?
Yeah, that is a big barrier that no one has really solved yet. The landlord tenant split incentive is definitely a problem where if the landlord doesn't benefit but the tenant does, it doesn't really drive, like what drives the landlord is cost, right? Like they want the cheapest option. So honestly, I think the best solution to that is ensuring that the rebates are good enough so that heat pumps are the least cost option upfront, because landlords don't care about the operating costs. It's the tenant that pays the operating costs.
But if you, I suppose if you do it in succession, in a succession of years, I mean, you can still get a rebate, but it is unclear that it is a property that you don't live in.
He's talking from a landlord perspective, not a tenant.
So we put heat pumps in a property that we rent,
Okay,
and we claimed a rebate for it, right?
Well, there was an incentive, Rhode Island incentive, but I don't think the federal tax incentives. But the Rhode Island incentives have no problem with that at all.
oh, great, yeah. Yeah, landlords can definitely access the incentive, and I'm glad you guys did. I'm just saying that it's hard to convince some landlords to do that if it's still more expensive than a gas system.
Right. We also put an induction stove
Oh, great,
in the house, but I don't think we would qualify for a rebate on that because our income is higher than our tenants, too high.
yeah,
Or the tenants would have qualified for the stove rebate, we didn't.
right, yeah. Okay, moving along to solar options. So if you are interested in putting solar on your property, we do recommend going through Energy Sage. They are a free online platform that offers up to 7 quotes from pre-screened installers. So basically what you do is you go online on their website, you put in your information, your address, I think your tax filing status, and maybe your electricity bill. And they shoot out 7 quotes from different installers. It's a combination of both local installers and national installers. And then they do side-by-side quote comparison reviews. So they easily compare all your different quotes that you get side by side. And then they also offer free independent advisors. So they have energy advisors that will meet with you and walk through the different quotes, give you advice on which ones they would go with. It's all free and easy to register, and there are no sales calls, which I think is really nice because the solar industry can sometimes be really high pressure sales. I'm sure you've all experienced people knocking on your doors trying to sell you solar. The installers will not contact you unless you contact them first. So it's really nice in that respect. So to talk about solar incentives in Rhode Island, there is the federal tax credit. So you can get a 30% tax credit where when you file your federal income taxes, you can claim 30% of the total cost of the project as a credit towards your federal tax bill. So it's not an upfront rebate, it is a tax credit. We also have net metering in Rhode Island, which is probably the second biggest incentive, second to the federal tax credit. This allows you to get credited for electricity that you export to the grid, and for production up to 100% of your on-site monthly electricity usage, you get credited at the full retail rate, so the full rate of what we pay for electricity, including transmission and distribution costs, so it's a higher credit. And then for production between 100 to 125% of your usage, you get credited at the wholesale rate, which is just the rate that the utility pays for just the electricity. So it doesn't include the transmission and distribution and things like that. So it is a slightly lower credit. And then you don't get credit at all for any production beyond 125% of your usage. The next incentive program for solar in Rhode Island is the Renewable Energy Growth Program. This compensates you with a cash payment for your energy production. It depends on your project size and terms. You can do a term of 15 or 20 years, and then Rhode Island Energy will pay either 33.85 cents or 32.35 cents per kilowatt hour back to you. This is a either or program, so you can either join the Renewable Energy Growth Program or the net metering program. You can't do both. I will say most people find that the net metering program is the more advantageous of the two. There's also the Renewable Energy Fund small scale solar grants, where you can get up to $5,000 for new solar installations. However, if you participate in that program, you cannot participate in the Renewable Energy Growth Program. All right, other green electricity options. So we do have a green powered program. Let's say solar is not well suited for your roof. Maybe you have an older roof, or your roof is covered by, shading from trees, and it's not ideal for solar. You do have other options. We do have a green powered program where you basically sign up for our program and we purchase renewable energy on your behalf. And it goes directly through your electricity bill. So you sign up through us, but with the utility, and you basically pay a monthly fee to add more renewables to the grid. So that is one option. That's not necessarily a cost saving option. That's just a you want to add more renewables to the grid option. A cost saving option is if you live in 7 of the municipalities in Rhode Island that do offer community choice electricity. I had them listed, but apparently my slides have reverted back to the original slides. It's definitely Providence, Newport, South Kingstown, Barrington, Portsmouth. Yeah, there's 7 of them. They're listed on our website if you're interested. But basically, these programs allow those municipalities to buy renewable energy in bulk. So because they're purchasing it in bulk, they're able to get a discount that they can then pass on to you as consumers. And so this adds more renewable energy to the grid than what's required by state law, and also typically results in bill savings for you as well. So if you do live in one of those 7 municipalities, you probably already are enrolled in it. I think it was an opt-out versus an opt-in. But if you're not, you should definitely check it out. And if you are not in one of those municipalities and you're interested in bringing community choice electricity to your municipality, come talk to me, because we also help advocate for that as well. You usually have to have a meeting with the town council and try and persuade them and all that fun stuff. We also do just want to flag not to take the bait for green competitive supplier offers. There's a lot of high pressure sales out there that are offering you, green electricity at a lower cost than the contract term is super scammy and eventually increases over time. So definitely do not recommend going through that, and recommend either installing solar on your house, going through our green powered program, or if you live in a green municipal or community choice electricity municipality, enrolling in that. There also is an affordable solar access program that Rhode Island has, where if you make less than or equal to 80% of the Rhode Island median income, you qualify for low-cost solar through the Affordable Solar Access Program. I met with the program administrator, and they don't actually check your income. So while it is a low-income program, I've heard of people accessing it who are not low-income. So take that as you will. It is administered through the Renewable Energy Fund and the Rhode Island Office of Energy Resources. And some of the key requirements are approval of a landlord if you're a renter. So you actually can access this as a renter, which is really cool. You just need your landlord to approve of it. The roof does need to be in good condition. The solar system needs to meet minimum performance requirements. So it basically needs to be able to produce enough electricity. And you do have to be a resident of these towns. So either Woonsocket, Central Falls, Pawtucket, Providence, Cranston, West Warwick, East Providence, Warren, Middletown, or Newport. So some features of the ASAP solar lease: there is no minimum credit score or income requirement. Hence what I said earlier, they try and market it as a low income program, but there isn't actually an income requirement. They do offer energy efficiency. So Passagen, the developer, will conduct a home energy audit and implement energy efficiency upgrades at no extra charge to help boost your energy savings. Discounted pricing. So eligible homeowners will receive a discounted solar lease that will provide savings for residents on both the standard residential or low income utility rate. They do have a 25-year performance guarantee, as well as maintenance and warranty support. So during the duration of the lease, Passagen, the developer, is responsible for system repairs, warranty claims, and ensuring the system for the full 25 years. And then they also guarantee first year savings. So they guarantee that you will save money on your energy costs during the first year. And they also do expect savings over the term of the lease, but they do not guarantee that. All right, now to move on to electric vehicles and e-bikes. So just to quickly go over the benefits of electric vehicles, they are better for the environment. They reduce health risks and harmful pollution. They're more efficient. They are cheaper to charge and maintain. They also have less moving parts to break, and they are fun and fast. And that's a big benefit. If you are interested in learning more, we have a whole Drive Green team that educates people about electric vehicles. We are constantly doing webinars on EVs. We have a EV 101 webinar that I've linked here. We also go into detail on charging, how winter impacts your range, all those questions that people often have. Yes.
Hi, so I have a question about like what to say to someone that's like against the concept. For example, they've said like, oh, mining the rare earth minerals for the batteries or something like that, things like that.
Yeah.
What do you say to those kinds of arguments?
Yeah, so I'll actually get into that in another slide, but unfortunately, nothing is perfect, right? With that being said, there has been study after study that's shown that although electric vehicles are not perfect, they are better than internal combustion engine cars. They do result in less emissions reductions. The mining thing is an issue, and the Inflation Reduction Act actually significantly worked to address that issue by creating requirements for the incentives for you to be eligible for the electric vehicle incentives. They started requiring that the batteries be able to be recycled in the cars, and there was actually a lot of tax credits for creating battery recycling plants in the United States. Unfortunately, things aren't working out the way we planned because of all the federal uncertainty. But yeah, long story short, nothing is perfect, but electric vehicles are better for the environment than gas cars.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so EV basics. There are two main types of EVs. There's the battery electric vehicle, which is fully battery powered, and it usually has between 60 to 350 plus miles of range, and that range is increasing. There are some cars that can even go up to 400 miles now. Some examples are the Honda Prologue or the Tesla Model Y. And then there's also plug-in hybrids, which are powered by both gas and electricity. So these typically have 150 to 570 miles of gas range, and then 25 to 53 miles of electricity range or battery range. Common examples of these are the Toyota Prius Prime and the Hyundai polarity. Honda, not Hyundai. So kind of to get at what you were asking about, so EVs are cleaner than gas cars and typically emit less carbon pollution than their comparable gas car. We have two popular electric vehicles listed here. You'll see that they emit much less carbon dioxide than the national average for trucks and SUVs. And the miles per gallon carbon dioxide equivalent that you see there refers to the idea that a gas car could not meet a specific fuel economy would need to meet a specific fuel economy to generate an equivalent amount of pollution. So how much carbon an electric vehicle emits depends on two things. The grid it's charged by, so how clean the electricity is, and then also the vehicle's efficiency in using the energy from the battery to move. Different vehicles have varying efficiencies, meaning that they emit different amounts of carbon over a given distance. And as the grid gets cleaner, an electric vehicle will get cleaner and emit even less carbon pollution over time. Now this gets to your question. So life cycle emissions basically covers the manufacturing process and usage of the vehicle or time spent on the road. As you can see in this graph, the manufacturing process for an electric vehicle does emit slightly more emissions than that of a gas car. This is due to the energy and materials needed to produce electric vehicle batteries. But we can also see that the biggest chunk of life cycle emissions take place when the vehicle is on the road, which is the gray section of the bar. So we can see that electric vehicles still emit less greenhouse gases than gas cars at the end of their lifespan, even despite their higher, emissions due to the battery requirements. An average gas sedan will exceed electric vehicle emissions over its entire lifetime after only 22 months on the road. And that's based on the average vehicle miles traveled. So overall, electric vehicles have far less life cycle emissions than gas cars.
Oh, George had a question.
Yeah.
Does that also factor in that the batteries tend to be reused for other projects?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
I doubt it, but I've sold some after some different EV batteries.
Yeah,
So they can still be used.
yeah, that's good thing to note. All right, now to go over charging. So there are three main types of charging. There is level 1, which is a standard 120 volt outlet that you just plug a cord into. This gives you 3.5 to 6.5 miles range per hour. It can be used at your home, but obviously does require quite a bit of time to fully charge the electric vehicle. The most common type of charging is level 2, which utilizes a 240 volt outlet. You typically do need to have an electrician come out and help install that. But this provides 14 to 35 miles of range per hour, and it can be installed at home or is often available at public charging stations. And then a DC fast charger, or also known as level 3, uses a 480 volt outlet. This is not typically installed at someone's home, but is rather at a public charging station. And this is the fastest charger and can charge 100 miles of range in 30 minutes. Electric vehicles also offer significant savings on maintenance costs. That's because they just have a lot less parts. You're not, needing to replace the brakes as often. So the average EV driver saves $4,600 in lifetime maintenance and repair. So definitely something to take into consideration when you're considering the upfront cost of an EV compared to a gas car, compared to the maintenance savings and operating costs of an EV. So here are the Rhode Island electric vehicle incentives. This program is still up and running. It has not been paused or run out of funding. So the base rebate is $1,500 for a battery electric vehicle and $1,000 for a plug-in hybrid. And then there's an additional rebate on top of that for low income. There's also a used electric vehicle rebate of $1,000 for a battery electric vehicle and $750 for a plug-in hybrid. And again, additional incentives on top of that for low income. Currently, there are still federal electric vehicle incentives available. For a new electric vehicle, you can get up to $7,500 off. I will note that vehicle eligibility is determined by several factors, such as final assembly location, battery components, and critical minerals. So that's what I was getting at. The Inflation Reduction Act was written to try and incentivize better battery components and better mining practices. The used electric vehicle, you can get an incentive up to $4,000 or 30% of the sales price, whichever is lower. However, the vehicle must be 2 years old and it must cost less than $25,000. You also do have to purchase it through a dealership, so it can't be you just purchasing it from a random person. And we do have a lot more information on the tax credits on our website if you are interested. There's also charging incentives. So for a standard charger, if you do not need an electrical wiring upgrade, you can get a rebate of 50% up to $350. If you do need an electrical wiring upgrade, you can get 50% up to $700. And then there's also an income qualified, which is slightly more, so 75% for no upgrade needed, up to $500, or if you do need an electrical upgrade, 75% up to $1,000. So if you are interested in driving electric or even just learning more about electric vehicles, we encourage you to check out our EV Finder, which is a really cool tool that we have on our website where you can actually filter by different criteria. You can filter by lowest price, you can filter by tax credit eligibility. It's a really helpful tool to see in real time which state and federal incentives apply to which vehicles. And it's a good way to find out, if your vehicle applies for the federal tax credit, just because there are so many stipulations and requirements for it to be eligible. And lastly, there's also an e-bike incentive. It's called the Erica Nadowski Electric Vehicle or Electric Bicycle Incentive Program. Erica Nadowski was a climate advocate that sadly passed away a few years ago, so they named the program after her. You can get a standard rebate up to $350 or 30%, whichever is less, or there's also an income qualified up to $750 or 75%, whichever is less. Now, that was a lot of information. Thankfully, there's a really awesome calculator from Rewiring America where you don't have to remember anything that I just told you, because you can just go to their calculator, input your information, and it'll plug out which incentives you're eligible for. So really useful tool that I definitely recommend checking out if you haven't already. Oh no, my federal uncertainty slide didn't come through. That's the most important slide. Okay.
Deleted it.
Yeah, seriously. Let me see. What did I say on that slide? Basically, there is a big, beautiful bill that is pending right now. The Senate draft just came out on Monday night and basically sunsets all of the federal tax credits that I just talked about after this tax year. So this is not final, right? It's not final until the president signs it. We aren't expecting it to get worse than the Senate draft. The House draft was worse. The Senate draft is slightly better. And basically, our advice right now is the tax credits are still available right now and will still be available through this tax year. So if you are interested in getting electric vehicles, solar, battery storage, heat pumps, do it now and make sure that the installers can finish the installation by the end of this tax year. That is my unfortunate advice for all of you, and I hope it changes and it doesn't come to fruition, but right now that is what is in the Senate draft, is that the tax credits are going to sunset at the end of this tax year.